Hello and welcome to Creators in Conversation, Designing the Future. I'm Mulaney Barnett, a visual artist and founder of the Black Artists and Designers Guild. This weekend, we launched Obsidian House, our virtual concept house for the modern, multi-generational Black family of 2025. The project showcases 23 badge members, a distinguished international group of Black creators, including fine artists, architects, and interior designers. Each of our spaces in this home is designed to honor the immensely rich legacy of creativity and cultural traditions of the global Black diaspora. Welcome to another installment of Creators in Conversation, a series convening visionaries in the visual arts, architecture, and interior design, and other fields to explore ideas and vision of how our traditions can transform to meet the demands of the futures we are building. Designing the Future brings together leading design experts sharing their perspectives on how technologies, ancient and new, may lead us to more sustainable ways of living. I'm thrilled to welcome our moderator, Novella Ford, Associate Director of Programs and Exhibitions at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. Novella and her work often act as a connector, presenting the marvels of Black culture, past, present, and future. We couldn't think of anyone better to lead this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us for Designing the Future. Novella.
Thank you so much, Mulaney. Let me just say congratulations on all the work that you're doing through BADG and the impact that it's having. And congratulations on the launch of the Obsidian experience. I don't know how to do it all.
Thank you so much, Novella. It's so wonderful to have you here and see you. And I'm just so looking forward to having your presence and engagement in this conversation.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Yep.
So thank you again. As Mulaney said, my name is Novella Ford, and the work that I get to do day in, day out is at the intersection of research and culture, bringing the archive to life and connecting the past to the present. As you can imagine, we are continuously building upon environments cared for by those before us, and hopefully passing along for the long or the short term to those who inhabit the spaces after us. So today's panel, Designing the Future, New Systems and Solutions for Living, we will explore future-leaning cultural and design practices with Everick Brown and Lindsey Shook. We will get their expert perspectives on technologies, ancient and new, in ways in which they may become foundations for sustainable ways of living. So coming to the screen next is Everick Brown, who is the principal of Everick Brown Design, an interior design firm with clients throughout the United States. Hi there, Everick.
Hi.
His interiors are self-described as modern classic with global perspective. Inspired by his travels through Europe, Asia, Australia, and New Zealand, Everick's work offers an intriguing mix of fashion, design, and style. He is a founding member of BADG and one of the Obsidian creators. Next to our screen is Lindsey Shook. She is a global content and brand strategist who serves as the editorial and brand director of California Home and Design Media Company. Hi there, Lindsey.
Hi.
She splits her time between Miami and San Francisco, and she has worked with a multitude of companies to generate meaningful stories and experiences that help expand their global reach. California Home and Design is also a regional media partner of the Obsidian experience. So again, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I want to let the audience know that please enjoy the chat function, be kind to each other, but also throughout the conversation, if you have questions for our panelists, please put them in the Q&A box. I will not be looking in the chat for your questions, so drop them in the Q&A box and we will get to them at the end of our conversation. That said, I like to think of technology as a liberatory device, right? I just did a brief search just to kind of see what kind of definitions were around the internet. And I love these two ideas of technology as the science of craft and knowledge of techniques, meaning like there are techniques that are built upon that technology, while it's new, while we think about it sort of in more of these electronic forms, it's really building upon ideas that have been passed on to us to help us manipulate and control our environments. Also, when I think about this in relationship to the Obsidian experiences, when we're talking about 1 million Black families. For me, Black people have been nothing but innovators since the time that they've come to this country. They have really had to make a way out of no way. They've had to use whatever was given to them and remix it into the worlds that we understand them living in today. So I think it's so important that we're having this conversation. And I would love to hear from each of you, what are you thinking about when you think about ancient technology? And then we'll get into a conversation about current and future technology. We'll start with you, Everick.
So, yeah, I was going to say, I'll just jump right in. Listen, when I think of ancient technology, the first thing that comes to mind is fire, right? It changed the way humans exist. And it's sort of, for me, it's the epitome of what technology is.
How about you, Lindsey?
I mean, for me, I think of technology as really, the means for creating solutions to solve problems or make our life more efficient, right? So that to me has applied from, ancient history to now, is that, while we often think of technology as just our phone or social media platform, it's really just the thought process and the application to create things to make life more efficient, right? Mm-hmm. So like we were just discussing earlier is, without Zoom, we wouldn't have an efficient connection these days, right? So I'm very interested to see how it will continue to evolve based on the need of where our society is, right, versus being a leader and telling us how to live.
Right. So
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say my concern, technology to me can be bittersweet, right? We're connected now all in different places, parts of the world. But what it also has a tendency to do is to keep us in those places. Right. And, human connection is all about touch, right? Without touch, we can't grow. So you'll see for me, my goal is to incorporate and weave in this notion of technology with true connection.
Okay. And we're going to be able to talk in 2 seconds about specifically your space, Everick, inside of the Obsidian House, which is a concept that's set just 4 years into the future, 2025. But as we all know, right, anything can happen in 4 years, let alone 1 year, right? This time last year, the majority of the population had no idea that the places that we dwell in would become central to our livelihood, right? And there's both a privilege in being able to have a place to dwell in, right? But it becoming central and not necessarily needing to leave our houses for some in order to maintain that livelihood. So Everick, let me ask you, what are some of the concerns that you were thinking about that you addressed by design and technologies of our time inside of the Obsidian spaces that you had the chance to create?
Yeah, that's great. So my biggest concern is this reliant upon electronic technology. Mm-hmm. So as I was charged with, one of our tenets was not only innovation, but it was technology. I decided to approach it from the perspective of applied technology, but looking at, I don't live in a city, I live in the woods. So we often lose our ability to have technology. So when you're bereft of electronic technology, how do you survive? How do you exist? And that's when I get into, for me, sometimes no matter how far you look forward, we're really looking backwards. So I came up with the idea of an analog room. And what does that mean? It's a room bereft of electronics, but rich in technology and history. So you'll see my space mirrors an archival room. There are books, there are family pictures, there are objects and accents, and all of these put in place to tell a traditional story that comes from the African culture, right? When I look at my great-grandmother's picture, You know, I'm not only seeing this image of a person, but it's also defining who I am and where I come from. The objects and accents do the same. I collect both African and Asian artifacts, which again, for me, no matter how far I'm looking forward, I'm looking back. So I was really looking at, as we create all this technology in the Obsidian House, on that day that we fall off the grid or we lose electricity, what do? You have a room where you can grab books and entertain yourself. You have board games, dominoes, cards, chess, where you can play and interact with each other. And then of course, there's the lounge side of the room where you can banter and challenge each other in conversation. And, you know, home would not be home, and I'm talking about a Black home, without some place for music. You know, my fondest memory is dancing in front of a mirror in the living room with family, but music is an integral part of our community. So I thought it was important to have a turntable that we could play some vinyl and, you know, keep it as real as possible.
And Everett, let me stop you for a second because I want to make sure that we pull up some of those images so that we can see what you're talking about inside of this space.
So this is sort of the end result. We're looking at the back of the room. And speaking of technology, that back bookcase not only holds vinyl, meaning albums, but it also drops down into a bed. So I partnered with Resource Furniture because they, I believe, are innovative in terms of helping people maximize space. So that is very important in my room too, which is how do you get one room to do double, triple duty? So in this new state we live in, called the pandemic, we're working from home, we're also schooling from home, we're playing from home, and we're socializing. And when you look at the analog vestibule, it encompasses all of those things.
Next slide.
Next slide. This was an inspirational shot where I start. This is a project, top left-hand corner, by David BADG. What I love about this is it's Afro-futuristic, but it's the epitome of something from 1,000 years ago. And that juxtaposition of looking forward and looking backward and applying all of that knowledge is what you get with this. But certainly you can see I was inspired by African culture. You can move to the next slide. We can so the other part for me was a library, this notion of creating an archive the old-fashioned way. So creating a room that feels like stacks. You go in and you get lost. And what you can find from books is inspiration. You can travel the world, right? And you can learn. So a book library environment was important. Next slide, please. Games are really important. Again, this was to inspire thought. And so what I love about the Black community is we play bones. A lot of people are like, what are bones? Bones are dominoes, but it's a game that's not only strategic, it's a game where a lot of banter goes on. And I always found being at that table and bantering with my cousins has really prepped me for the boardroom, believe it or not. Backgammon, where you have to think. Chess, where you have to think. And one of my most exciting games is jacks. A lot of people don't know jacks, but when I went to the Midwest to visit family, we would play jacks. You don't need electricity to do it, right? You just get on the table or the ground and you play jacks. Next slide, please.
Bounce the ball and
grab as many jacks. And I love it because, you know, of course, the women don't think I can play, but I can play. So again, you create, you know, this experience of banter and having a lot of fun. In my gather room, it was all about connection and interaction. And when I think about home, I think, I think about family, which is about connection, which is about interaction. And so I created this space where the family could gather and interact with each other. And one of the things I didn't say when I started is my space is on the second floor. So it really is a private living space for the immediate family, as opposed to friends and families coming over to visit. Next slide. The creative side for me initially started about music. It was about a piano, but as it turns out, 2 other creators in the house had grand pianos. And I thought, oh my God, music is so important. I need to have music. So this shot actually ended up being a turntable, which worked out even better, I think, for the space. Next slide. This was inspiration. Kuba cloth is a cloth I grew up with. My mother is an artist and a fashion designer by training, but I was exposed to a lot of texture and color. So this was very important in my space as well.
And
Next
can I
slide.
say something even
Yes.
just about that design there?
Yeah.
You know, when we talk about ancient technologies, the ways in which messages were put inside of patterns, right?
Yes.
From the hair to the cloth. So that is something that I'm thinking about. And even when you're thinking about the future, in terms of being able to have a language, right, between the people in the house and people from outside were to come in, what does that also look like? So I just wanted to mention that as you were going.
No, it's a really good point. And people always ask, why are Black people so obsessed with their hair? And what they don't understand is culturally, hair represented communication, right? It was a symbol of whether or not you were married, whether or not you were single, if you had gone through puberty. So all of this is quite significant. And then not to mention, the micro and macro aggressions that we, come up against because of our hair. So hair is quite significant in the Black community. On this slide, the color palette, this was deliberate for me and is one of my passions. Often when we think about African inspiration and colors, we think about bright saturation of color. And in fact, the Africans, more than anybody else in the world, started with muted colors. And so it's often overlooked. So it was important for me to have a space and really represent the muted perspective of the African culture. Next slide. So this is ultimately what the space looked like. We're looking back at the back of the room. You see the turntable. It's a DJ turntable. As I said earlier in the cover page, there are albums within the bookcase, as well as a bed that drops down for overnighters. To the right and left, as it comes closer to you, there's an ability to convert the bookcases into desks. So there are actually 3 desks for work from home, school from home. Next slide. So this is the lounge area of the room, looking over the back of the room. Here, it was important to create this area where you could interact and connect, but not only to each other, but to nature. So you'll see in the room, it's quite, what would I call it? Muted, it's calming. So in this age of technology, particularly electronics, where everything is so lively, I was looking to create this space where you would walk in and just go, ah. Next slide. This is a picture of where I was actually inspiring our renderers to understand what I meant by vinyls. So this is the collection of vinyls. And I really wanted to show pictures like Aretha Franklin, Bob Marley, Miles Davis, Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, Grace Jones, right? These all invoke a certain kind of, not only feeling, but spirit, which, I think inspire our people. So it was important for me to bring that flavor to the room as well. Next slide.
And I'm gonna ask Lindsey to jump in here as we take a look at this bookshelf, because also what's important, right, to building and design and technology is geography, right? And what kind of considerations are we making for the environments in which these things are sitting in? So could you just talk a little bit about stories that you may have come across, design that you may have come across, what you're seeing and whatever it is presenting in a space that is in the Bay Area? Just a little bit about, geography and environment.
I want to actually talk about what really, drew me to Everick Space when I had the press tour the other day. Is number one, music is a big part of my life. I worked in music for 10 years, and so my vinyl collection is everything. So the beautiful, it's actually the one thing I've moved with me across the country more than any other piece. So to see that really cool piece that was designed with resource furniture, to me, is the definition of technology, right? And in modern design, we're doing everything we can to hide technology, right? So I think his design represents the exact, especially in California, what's happening is the exact type of spaces that are being designed. One of the second reasons I love his space so much is that I often think the most creative solutions are devised when there's a void of technology. So when you have space to think, when you're not, you don't have a phone in your face doing everything for you, people often come up with more solutions. So I think, especially in the Bay Area where Silicon Valley is located, that this space is a beautiful opportunity for more technology to be created. And the third thing I wanted to just comment on for the space is, I think that the objects that are shown in the bookcases, in the, the record collection, often, it's what's lacking in modern design, right? We're losing our appreciation for objects. So I think one of the, what I love the most about just this piece we're looking at right here is how it's subtle and sophisticated, especially in the tone, but it still celebrates the family heritage and the objects that have made the history of the family.
I think, there's more so even the tension between objects, right? Because we're understanding that maybe a little less is more, but also wanting to hold tight to those things that are dear, right, to us. What really does matter to the family, what matters to my legacy. And also understanding that everybody does not live in palatial, right, spaces. So there's also an understanding of how our environments are changing our relationship to objects. Do either of you want to say more about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Say, like, in terms of even just architecture, right? Like I love modern architecture, but I do hope that we continue to preserve historic structures so that we can hold on to the, to the integrity of our history, right? And I think this needs to happen inside the home as well. We shouldn't be hiding all of our vinyl. We should be celebrating the Bob Marley record that we have loved since we were 10 or how old, right? So I think objectification should be more celebrated within modern design.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And, this idea that, so you take my space that had 4 ideas in one area or one room. I've been thinking about this. For me, I've been saying through this whole process that we're inviting people to be inspired by what we're doing. And as I kind of went through my process, I said, if I can't think big, then how will I create something small that's representative of big, right? So in other words, if I start small and I create a bedroom and a bathroom, how will I ever think to make that 300 square feet accommodate a kitchen, a dining room? And so for me, I think it's very important what Obsidian offers, which is this ability to not only think out of the box, but be inspired by cultural activities that really drive what the end use is of a room, whether it's listening to music, reading a book, or just looking at a picture of a family member.
Right. And I think what we've gotten away from in design is we focused on a trend or a specific technology built around that. And I think what I'm so in love with Obsidian about is it's truly back to who the family is, what their culture is, how they interact with their culture, and how it helps them move forward. And I feel like it's a really great way to shift the focus of modern design and architecture as well.
Yeah, and you make a very good point. And even though it's not shown in my pictures, there's a legacy wall that was designed by Mulaney, our founder. And that legacy wall not only connects the entire house, but it is the epitome of passing information from our ancestors to our future ancestors, right? So it's really amazing that no matter how modern, no matter how futuristic this house is, it all comes right back down to actually making those ceramic panels that are the foundation of the house that Mulaney created.
And something I want to quickly add is that I think what that also does for the home itself is, we're in a culture of like buying a home, flipping it, moving quickly, or just, looking for the next best home. Where in the past, we really owned our homes forever. We passed it down to the next generation. And I think we've gotten away from that. And I believe by creating these type of elements within structures, maybe we'll get back to the generation of sharing a home.
Very much. I agree 100% with that. I'm wondering, had we not been in the pandemic, or maybe I should pose it this way, we were in the pandemic. You, as designers, had the opportunity to explore Obsidian House within this idea that you're in your home now, right? So that experience in the home has also shifted, right? I love puzzles. I couldn't order a puzzle worth of nothing because everybody suddenly was doing all of the sort of slow down things, right? They were doing puzzles, they were playing games, everything that you talked about that's inside of this house. So I'm curious about what were some of the things that came up because we were in the pandemic, and what were some of the ideas that you might have been considering in terms of technology and trends that you would have liked to explore it anyway towards a future design idea?
Yeah, for me, like I said, I think the most important was this whole idea of a transformative space. So, work by day, entertain by night. Or relax by night. But most people were challenged with coming up with space. So one of the things I said early on in the pandemic, I was interviewed by Associated Press, and I came up with this commentary of a room with a view. I'm looking for a room with a door. Right. So this idea that you want to create privacy to have a Zoom call, but you need to be close enough to make sure your kids are studying or doing their class assignments. So we're in the midst of the pandemic, and I kind of look at it as a vortex. Like, we talk about 2025 being right around the corner, but I think once we come out of this vortex, it's going to be 10 years, 15 years. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. If you don't have technology, you're somehow getting left, which is why it's so important to me that we really incorporate and weave, this analog and touch, just human touch into the process.
For us, I mean, I think we can all agree that we've seen how flexible our homes are as a result of the pandemic. I'm very interested to see how the actual modern floor plan of a home changes. I think it will shift from a floor plan back to a more segmented floor plan. So
I agree.
Workspaces, office spaces, Peloton gyms, whatever it is people, desire. I'm very interested to see what will come out of the pandemic. I think the home industry has become the most the busiest and one of the most lucrative industries as a result of the pandemic, because people are spending on their homes from high, right? So my main interest is, from a totally separate conversation, but I'd love to see how we can change the production of materials to provide more affordable materials that are less toxic for all ranges of home. Because the home has become so important now. So we're spending so much more time in it. We need to make it healthy for everyone. So that is the one technology that I really hope emerges from the pandemic. as well as I would love to see more accessibility to solar, because I think like the Tesla wall is a very intriguing product and can really help us reduce power. Because I mean, can you imagine the power we've all consumed over the past year? While we may not be flying, which is great for our carbon footprint, we have been, really producing a lot of power, washing our clothes more, cooking more.
Yeah.
So I really hope that as a result of the pandemic, we'll create more green technologies that make our home healthier for all of us.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, I hope people will be inspired to repurpose items like wood. Immediately comes to mind is the Astor Gates in Chicago. What that man is doing is phenomenal. I mean, he's taken old fire hoses and creating art. But what he's doing more importantly is doing it in the community, south side of Chicago, not tearing down new trees to rebuild a community, but repurposing what's already there.
Yeah, I mean, I love what both of you had to say about sort of this green technology, making things affordable for everybody across the board. When we're talking about sustainability, it should not be a privileged space to be in, right? You should be able to inform your home in that kind of way. Which leads me really to my last question. How can design be married to our humanity and commitments and ideals that we uphold, right? Like, I love that Obsidian House has 7 core or a few core principles: wellness, identity, sustenance, terra, legacy, dwelling, and ancestral futures, right? So as each of you have your own set of principles and how you go about in the world, I think you all started to talk a little bit about that, but say more. I'll start with you, Lindsey.
Yeah, I can start. For me, there's 2 real tenets of how I feel like we can preserve our future by looking at our past with design. And one is, by one thing we try to celebrate in the magazine is designers and makers who are local. I think the design industry should play a much bigger role in preserving trade skills like welding and woodcrafting. And because this is the art that is for history, since history, all throughout history, has helped us learn about our past. So I really would love to see a more celebration around those trades and more inclusion within projects of less fast design and much more collected local design. I also think we need to, especially within Black communities, we need to make sure we're hiring within to design spaces. There's an architect in LA named Damar Matthews who's working on a really great project in his community, and his goal is to expand it nationally, where he designs for Black communities from his Black perspective, but we're not inviting outsiders in to design, right? And we're not allowing corporations to do that either. We're enforcing a bank when it moves into a community to hire a local architect who knows how the community might respond and might appreciate the design. So for me, those are the 2 things I would love to see grow.
Yeah, and I was going to say, piggybacking on the foundation of what Obsidian is about, one of the principles that's really important to me is health and wellness. And we often don't think of health and wellness as diversity and inclusion. I can't tell you how important it is to weave diversity and inclusion into the process. And by that, what I mean by that is I'm a world traveler. So I'm not only interested in design as it relates to my community, but I'm interested in design as it relates to as I move about in the world. So for example, if I go to an airport and I use the bathroom, and when I'm done, I walk up to a faucet and the water doesn't come on, that is poor design because it has omitted my skin complexion as, the way to turn the water on. And so when we think about design and how it changes the world, it is really important that we're not only designing to and for people of color, but we keep them in mind. And the way you do that is to have people on your teams. And it's really interesting to me that when we put together a football team or a basketball team, we're looking for the best talent to do particular things. a quarterback to throw the ball, a receiver to receive it, a lineman to block, to make sure all of that can be executed. When we get into the corporate environment, that just goes by the wayside. We don't select the most talented person to identify color or texture, or just to be in the room to say, you've forgotten about people of color.
I just wanted to quickly add one last thought to build off what he's saying. Is I was really struck by the shaman room in Obsidian House, because it's a massive screen on one of the walls where the shaman could transport to, you know, where their home or wherever it is. And I'm very interested, you know, if God forbid the pandemic continue to thrive, is that we're going to continue to become more insular and divisive, right? This blocks people being exposed to other cultures, which closes their mind. So I'm really interested in what way technology like a massive screen and content and TV and radio can further expand and expose people so that they don't have such closed-minded views of other cultures.
Yeah. And on that note, that's where I always say, you know, I think as Obsidian, we're inviting people in to experience being inspired. Often people will come in looking for the difference, right? So the difference means that one thing less something amounts to something else. If people can come in and be inspired and truly understand the experience, then you'll see our values are all the same, and how much we are really alike. And where we're different, it becomes an inspiration to change what you're doing. Because what Obsidian is doing is sort of laying the roadmap to how we all will live in the future, right? This notion of a nuclear family is something of the past, right? Today's family is two fathers or two mothers, a mother and a father, or it might just be one mother or one father. So Obsidian was charged, all of its creators, with saying, what does that mean to you? And how does this look? And it feels like because of the pandemic, we might be moving into a multi-generational situation. So this is another thing that Obsidian inspires, not only for Black families, for families at large.
Yes, I agree. I'm married to a Cuban man, and I'm ready for his mom and dad to move.
I know, get ready.
I believe we're going to see a lot more multi-generational planning.
Yeah.
I think it's
No, I mean, I completely agree around this idea of the nuclear family. I was thinking there was a question that was posed as part of the launch yesterday, and it was something like, you know, what does Black family mean to you? And it would seem like a simple answer one could answer about sort of one's household. But for me, I really thought about it. For me, meant extended resources in households. Right. So I did have a mother, father, brother in my household. And then eventually that wasn't the case. But there were at least 7 homes that I knew like the back of my hand, because I spent so much time with cousins over here, aunts over here, grandparents over there. And so it has never occurred to me that the nuclear family was just my household. It was always the sense that I've got at least 7 households that encompass sort of, you know, my family environment. And I just think that that's such a powerful idea to even think about, no matter the size of the space, right? Large or small, how we convene inside of our homes matters, right? And I've been to convenings in families' homes in the projects, and I've been to convenings in families' homes in the suburbs, right? And there were some very key things that were the same about all of them, but one was that I was welcome, right? And so I love that idea of home being a place that welcomes, and whomever you want to welcome inside of that place, as well as family. Well, I have another question here, and just want to remind the audience that we do have a little bit of time for Q&A. So again, if you have questions, we have about 7 minutes for them. Put them in the Q&A box, because I won't see them necessarily in the chat. But Lindsey mentioned earlier the Tulsa wall. Are there other technologies in development that you find exciting that you think will move us toward greater sustainability for the everyday?
I can just talk about one actually that I learned of this week. A friend of mine in San Francisco is an architect, and he just designed a 3D printed school that was placed in Madagascar with a group called Thinking Huts. And I'm not by any means an expert on 3D printing, but I find it very interesting to see how this could help us both reduce cost and reduce carbon footprint.
Yeah, geothermal technology is another, right? And warming and cooling or keeping the house consistently at a temperature that's comfortable.
Mhm, mhm. I would love to hear you all's response to what does family for you, Everick, I will say a Black family, and what does family mean to you?
Yeah, family is
For both
everything.
of you, but
Look, family is everything. Family is a place of inspiration. You know, I got my foundation to jump off, at home. My father was killed in the Vietnam War when I was going on 2. So I was shipped to the Midwest to spend time with my grandparents and family in the Midwest. So I have a West Coast upbringing with a very strong Midwest influence. But most importantly, what I love about family is they keep you grounded. No matter how high you go up, they will whip my little tail and keep me right where I belong, and I love it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how about you, Lindsey?
You know, family for me is interesting. I come from the Deep South, raised by a single mom and a few grandparents. And I've built a big family through my many lives in San Francisco and New York and in Miami, that I consider, one of my best friends. I consider her my absolute sister. So family to me, like my family and my daughter and my husband are everything to me. But I really appreciate the friendships that I've made along the way who have become my family, who I know I can count on no matter what, who do not judge me. One of them being a wonderful Black family. So I do have a Black family.
Absolutely.
I think, that's what I do love about technologies. I am able to FaceTime my mother every day and see her, and FaceTime my friends in North Carolina and in California and in Jamaica, and stay connected to my family.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Family and family, all folks that we choose to
Well
love, to
said.
be clear. I just want to remind everybody that there are so many more panels happening today. So please make sure that you visit BADG on Instagram, as well as online at their website, and you will get more information as we go off. But I just want to say thank you so much, Lindsey and Everick, for your insight. Thank you for engaging this conversation. There was some chat happening about folks wanting to ensure that they find, Black builders or diverse builders, craftsmen. And so I think BAD or BADG, I guess is a way to call it, is doing some of that, but certainly, sharing in these kinds of conversations and in the chats, you never know who might be there. So enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you, Mulaney, for bringing us all together.
I'm sad.
And thank you, Novella. Great job.
Thank you. Yes.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you. Have a great day.
Take care.